Hi everybody, and welcome to the square January bench buddy. And this one's Bur Baby It's Cold Outside. I'm not sure that they actually named these original ones. All the other ones, I think they just called it Square Bench Buddy. Yeah, Bench Buddy January Square. So they didn't give it a name, but this one has a real cute little square that says Bur Baby It's Cold Outside. Got a little penguin on it. So this one's a little different. We're gonna do 4 smaller blocks and sew them together to make the top. So we're gonna do this in little hitches because each design is separate, of course. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about what you need to do this pillow first. And this is on, gives us all the information here. I kind of messed up the Shape Flex information last time. So the Shape Flex does show in the instructions. They just put it in a different place in these. They kind of changed their instructions for the newer ones that we just completed, and they kind of changed the way they do their instructions. So that's why I was a little confused. So anyway, they do talk about the Shape Flex on the stuff, and I'll go through that here in a minute when I go to each piece. So let's talk about the Bur Block first and what you need. So you're going to need a background piece that is, excuse me just a second here, background piece that is, I think it is 6.5 by, no, I'm sorry, back, I have to find Bur background. Here we go, 6.5 by 6.5. And then you need the little lettering Bur, and this is 3.5 by 4.5. Now this particular block normally is raw edge applique. I actually redigitized this slightly and put a satin stitch over my original sample because I'm not a real big fan of raw edge applique, but it's starting to kind of grow on me a little bit, so I'm going to do this one raw edge applique. But I did take my little piece that is 3.5 by 4.5, and I put a piece of Shape Flex on the back just to give it some body so that it doesn't ravel quite as badly. Okay, so that's what I did with this one. So here's the piece for the Bur block. That's the 2 pieces you need for that. And then the little snowflake block, you need another piece of 6.5 by 6.5, and then you're going to need a piece of white glitter vinyl that's 4.5 by 4.5. And then there's 2 options of how to do this block. Either you can just do it standard applique and then trim it in the hoop, or in my case, I actually cut this out. I don't know if you can see the cuts on I cut this on my Scan and Cut, and because there's an SVG file that comes with it. And I cut this out because it's kind of intricate and I don't like to have to trim that much. So I'm going to show you how I did it with my Scan and Cut. The other way of trimming is just normal applique. Okay, so we'll do the one with the Scan and Cut. But you can see I've already cut this little snowflake out. And then you need the little block for the penguin. And this is the penguin block. So there's a background piece, and I've got Shape Flex on the back of that. All of these background pieces have Shape Flex. So the background piece for the snowflake is the blue one, and then that gray one here. But I did also put Shape Flex on the back of the Bur applique fabric just to give it some body so that it won't ravel as much. And then this is the background piece for the little penguin. Okay, and then this is his little head. But I did also put some Shape Flex on the back of, this is the inside part of his face, the little white part. And I put some Shape Flex on the back of this too, so that it wouldn't bleed the black through so much, because his little head is black. Okay, so I did put Shape Flex on that as well. And then the last pieces you need are several of these crazy patch pieces, and I think they're like 3.5 by 5, and I think there's 6 of them. Yeah, 6 of them. And these are just various colors of blue and the kind of greenish color that we're going to use in the final block, which will be the crazy patch block. Okay, and it's kind of done with it's applique, but it's going to have a nice cool like crazy patch design over the top of the raw edges. Okay, so there's all of our fabrics. Oh, and let's talk about the backing. So we got a couple pieces of backing. So the backings are, I got this navy blue. I think it shows black in the picture, but my little kit came with the navy blue, so I used navy blue. And so this is the 2 backs, and they're 6.5 by 8.5. And then you need 2 pieces for the binding. So these are 2.25 by the width of the back quarter. Okay, so they're like 21 inches wide. by 2 1/4. So that's going to be the binding. Okay. So we got all that fabric stuff out of the way here. So we're going to start with the snowflake block today. And this navy blue block right here. And it's done in a 4x4 hoop, which is really cool. Don't need a very big hoop for any of these. I think the biggest one is 5x7 because I think this little block here, the crazy patch block here, is done in a 5x7. I think the rest of them are in a 4x4. And I do, as usual, use slightly different stabilizers. So it calls for the shape flex, of course, on the back of the fabric, which we did. And it calls for cutaway stabilizer. I personally still like to use tearaway on most of the blocks. I am going to use the cutaway on this crazy patch. The way it's designed, I decided to leave the stabilizer in it. So we are going to use the cutaway for that, but the rest of them I'm going to use tearaway. I generally do on all these pillows. If you're going to be trimming your snowflake in the hoop, you'll need to tear off the clear plastic carrier sheet. Okay, so take this off before you start because we just need this as an applique piece. Now I cut mine on my scan and cut, so I'm going to leave mine on for right now, and I need to do what they call weeding. So in other words, I'm going to take my little weeding tool, and since this one is done, I thought I'd just do this in front of the camera. Since this one is done pre-cut, I'm going to leave this carrier sheet on it just to hold it, to have something to hang on to. And I'm going to weed this. So what I did is I cut it, and then I took my weeding tool and got it started. And I'm just going to carefully pull back all the unwanted pieces. Now this is kind of intricate, so I don't like to trim these in the hoop too well, so I just wanted to show you another way of doing this. And it's obviously, you are able to trim it in the hoop, but I thought it'd be fun for you to see the scan and cut method. So here's my cut, and I did mirror this because I cut this. This is heat transfer vinyl, so I left the carrier sheet on to cut it in my scan and cut, and I mirrored it because I had to turn it. I was cutting it from the back. So there's my little snowflake. So it's already go. So I am going to leave my carrier sheet on mine just because I need something to hang on to while I'm positioning it in the embroidery. Okay. All right. Get that out of the way. So let's talk about hooping. So we're going to hoop this little piece of blue fabric in a 4x4 hoop. Find my hoop here. And what I do, I don't know if this is the most traditional method or not, but I've always done this. They cut their fabrics, especially Kimber cuts their fabrics fairly small, so they're not going to fit completely in the hoop. Now this one's going to be pretty close to hooping all the way around. So what I do with my blocks, and I do this with all the quilts too, is I turn this over, and I showed you this in the last video, last January video. I'm just going to take my fabric glue stick, and you want to be using fabric glue stick because it's not going to gum up your needle. Okay. And this is the Dritz fabric glue sticks. Been using these for years. And I put it on my fabric, and I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to center this on my stabilizer, and I'm going to press it down so that just kind of holds it down so that when I go to hoop it, it's attached to the stabilizer. And this has been working for me. I've been doing this with the quilts. I don't get hardly any wrinkles. And of course, there's shape flex on the back of this too. I really love shape flex. It helps a lot, and it really preps your fabric nicely. Okay, so then we're going to take our hoop here. Hopefully I can do this on the machine. Okay, we're going to take the hoop. I'm going to center this as best I can. I don't do all the little marking of the center and all that stuff because did you know that actually the center of the hoop, the center where the grid puts it, is not really the center of the hoop. It's actually a little bit to the left. So I usually just kind of center it the best I can by eyeballing it. I don't do all that marking. And this one does pretty much hoop all the way around. Okay, so I pretty much got it centered. And when we trim this, if we need to move it a little bit, we can. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this in the hoop, tighten it up. And I do have, this is the tearaway stabilizer that I have behind here. Okay. All right, I have a number 11 embroidery needle on my machine. I have white bobbin thread, just the regular white bobbin thread in my bobbin. And I'm going to put white embroidery thread in because we're going to be working with the snowflake. So I put my white embroidery thread. These blocks are real easy. They go fast, so they're fun. But there's just several of them. You have to do 4. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my machine here. And the first step, there's only just like 3 steps to this. I did cut out, there's 3 steps. So when we get to the first one's going to be the placement line for the snowflake. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew out my step number 1 with the white thread. Your thread will show through. So the second step, if you're trimming in the hoop, will be a tack down stitch. So make sure that you have the tack down stitch the same color of your motif stitch, so, because it will show through. Okay. But if you cut it like I do, you don't need to do step number 2. We're going to skip to step number 3 after we put this in. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through both methods here. I'm kind of lazy today and I didn't want to have to trim this in the hoop, so I cut it out with a scan and cut. Okay, so this is the placement line, and this is the way you would do it with either method. Okay. Then if you are doing and we'll just pretend this is our white fabric. Then if you were going to do the trimming in the hoop method, you would lay your white glitter vinyl, okay, that white glitter vinyl that we took the plastic sheet off of, over the top, and then you would stitch out number 2, which would be the tack down line, and then you would trim with your scissors around the snowflake, okay, and trim away the fabric you don't want. So that is one method of doing it. The method I'm going to do today is I'm going to use the piece that I cut out with my scan and cut from the SVG file. So I left the carrier sheet on this one. And then what you got to do, I did mirror it, but this is not completely symmetrical. So what I had to do is kind of turn this until I got it on the size that you're going to see that it's not quite lining up yet. So I had to keep turning it until I got it on, oh, I think I got it. So once you get it lined up the right way, so it's kind of, you know, you have to kind of keep turning it around until you get the little the little snowflake to line up so that it covers up. See how it nicely covers up now, that placement line. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got it well placed. And the reason I left the carrier sheet on, the carrier sheet has a little bit of a tacky to it. And so when I go to put this down, then see, I can kind of stick it down to my fabric. So when I pre-cut heat transfer vinyl, I always leave the carrier sheet on. This gives me a little way to keep things from scooting on me, because I can slip it down. So I think that's good. So at this point, if you have trimmed your snowflake in the hoop after doing step number 2, then we're going to go over and we're going to press this down, because this needs to be pressed down to the fabric so it won't move. Okay. And then I have to move something so I can do that. So I'm going to take this over to my little pressing mat. I've got this pressed down, the carrier sheet holding it down so that it won't move on me. And there we go. And I'm going to take this out and I'm going to slide this over to my little wool cutting mat next to me, and I'll put the camera up so you can see me, okay? And I'm going to press this down with a pressing cloth. Now there is a carrier sheet, but you still need to put pressing cloth over the top because that carrier sheet is plastic, and you really need to put something over it so you don't, it kind of gets wrinkly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this down, and I'm going to press down on my snowflake for about 20 seconds or so, and I'm going to have to do a couple presses to press this down to my fabric. And the thing I love about this little iron is this is a 4x4 hoop. See, I can still put this little iron inside a 4x4 hoop. That's why I chose this one, because it was small enough to fit even in this little bitty hoop. Because I often have to do this pressing with the vinyls. Okay. All right. Like that. Then, with any luck at all, since we had the carrier sheet on here, and if this is adhered to the fabric well enough, I should be able just to pull this carrier sheet off like that. And that helped me then get that on there straight so it wouldn't move on me. Okay. If you have trimmed it in the hoop, of course, you know, we just ironed it down after you trimmed it. You didn't have to worry about it moving. All right, so there's my little snowflake. It's so fun to be able to do the cutting in advance. So if you have a scan and cut, I mean, this is a really good way to do this. And I think I got a little off on this one, but I don't think it'll be I think it'll be okay. All right, so since I have pre-cut this and I have ironed this down, I do not need to do step number 2. So I'm going to skip through step number 2 down to step number 3, which is just going to be my covering stitch. Okay, so if you did the applique trimming in the hoop, you have to use step 1 for placement, step 2 for tack, trim, and then step number 3 would be the next step, which is going to do your cover stitch. So that's what I'm going to do next. And I still got my white thread in there. It's all pressed down, so it shouldn't move anywhere. But I really like doing the pre-cuts on, I don't pre-cut like everything. Like they gave you, you know, the SVG files for basically all the appliques on this. So let me show you while this is stitching. So they gave you the pre-cuts for Bur. And to do a pre-cut with raw edge applique, sometimes it doesn't match very well. So when I did my Bur, I redigitized it to put a satin stitch on. So I did cut my letters out with the scan and cut. Since I'm going to do raw edge applique, I am not going to do that because I'm not positive that they're going to hit the fabric correctly and have it be even all the way around. And I've noticed that they've stopped doing SVG files for raw edge applique files now. Yeah, Kimber doesn't do that. They just do the ones for the covered files. But they also gave you like the ones for the little penguins. So if you want to cut all those out, and they even gave you these if you want to do all of these too. But I just don't take the time to do all the cutting with the scan and cut. But stuff like this that's really intricate is a lot easier than trying to trim it in the hoop. So, because I trimmed this the first time I did it in the hoop, and it took me quite a while. So I thought, well, we're just going to cut that out with the scan and cut. So, and it's going to sew along here. I'll probably go ahead and pause the video for a minute because this takes about 10 minutes to stitch out. And then we'll come back and see the finished little snowflake. Okay, so it's working on the center. There's a little decorative stitch in the center here. And do the little star in the center. Very cute. And I was a little worried about this one little section over here, but it actually sewed up fine. So I thought maybe I'd gotten it just a little bit off. But I really like the pre-cut method when you have something this intricate because it is a lot easier than trimming it in the hoop. But it's certainly possible. I did the first cup, you know, they did another little pillow that had a bunch of snowflakes on it, and I did that. The one that I did cutting it in the hoop and one that I did pre-cutting it in the scan and cut, and they both worked. It just took me a little longer to trim it in the hoop because there was a lot of little pieces to go around. All right, so it's got the little star done. And we're back to the beginning. So I'll hold it up here so you can see it. It turned out really cute. So this is the first block. So you're going to do one of these blocks with the little snowflake. And I think it looks really good. I was a little bit worried over here about if it was going to match up, but it matched up really well. So, okay. So now we're going to go on to the second block. I'm going to pause the video for a second and get ready for the second block. Okay, so I'm all set up ready to do the second block here. So we're going to do the Bur block. Okay, but we're going to do this one with the raw edge applique. So I have the shape flex on the back of my little gray block here. I'm going to turn it over. And again, I am using tearaway stabilizer on this. Okay, so I'm going to use tearaway again, and I'm just going to take my fabric glue stick on the back of my little block here and stick it down to my tearaway. Like that. Kind of get it centered as best I can. And then I'm going to hoop this as centered. I didn't do all the, again, they have you doing all the marking and the centering and everything, but I just kind of eyeball it. I think that works just as well for me. So I just kind of take this and eyeball it. I'm gonna make sure that I kind of have this. This is my 4x4 hoop again. We get to use another 4x4 hoop. So I'm going to eyeball this. And this one, again, pretty much, you know, it's the same size block. So it pretty much hoops all the way around. But they do make their blocks fairly small. So they don't always completely hoop. And just do the best you can to get it, you know, in the center. And you've got a little wiggle room all the way around. So when we go to trim these, it won't be a problem. Okay. Now I'm going to tighten this one up. So this is going to be our Bur block, and I'm going to go ahead and choose that one on my machine here. And let's see. Oops, got to find the right one. January. And it's the Bur. Okay, so like I said, my original one, I redigitized that block a little bit and made a satin stitch. So I have 2 burrs on mine, so I have to make sure I get the one with the raw edge. So we're going to try the raw edge applique this time. Like the instructions. I'm going to hit set and embroidery. All right. So I had my shape flex on the back of my background fabric. I have some shape flex on the back of my applique fabric as well. And that I'm hoping that that will keep it from being quite so ravelly when I'm trimming in the raw edge. So I have done a couple things raw edge lately and I've liked them, so I thought I'd give it a try. I'm always hesitant to try something like that, but we'll give it a try. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I want my my thread to be this mint julep. I'm using the Brother color, so this is a mint julep. And we're going to do the placement line. So the first step in this block is also going to be a placement line for our applique. So we're going to start out with the trimming part, and this one will be raw edge. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch out my placement. A little closer so you can see. Now this one will also take a little bit of trimming because there's quite a little bit to trim with the letters. So I'll probably turn the camera off for a moment while I do the trimming because it will take me a little bit. But I'll get started so you can see. But there's only a couple of steps in this one as well. That's going to do the, and then when you're trim, don't forget with the B, you know, there's like an inside and then the R. One R has an inside you got to trim out. So don't forget to trim the insides of the letters out. Okay, so we got the B there. Then we're going to do the other letters. So like the first B and the first R are kind of like capital letters, so that's why they have the little center spot that you got to trim out. And then the last 2 R's are lowercase letters. And it does all the little pieces, so it takes a minute even just to do the placement line. And when I did the satin stitched one, this one, I'll show you what I did. I actually did cut these letters out with my scanning cut, and then I could put them on, and I used heat and bond light on the back so that I could adhere them down inside those placement lines that are sewing right now. But this time we're going to do the trimming in the hoop. Thought I'd try doing one differently. Okay, so there's all of the placement lines. Okay, second, I got a couple little tails here to get rid of so that they're not in the way. I have a tendency to get tails right now. I have to ask my technician why I'm getting tails. All right, so then I'm going to take my piece of applique fabric that I have the shape flex on, and they give you, Kimberbell's given me several different options for the raw edge. Some of them are saying to use, what do they call it? They call the stuff that keeps things from fraying, fray check and some stuff like that. And I don't know, some fabrics don't do fray check too well, so I'm going to try the shape flex and see if that helps. I think it'll keep it from raveling. It might be just a little bit harder to trim, just to warn you, because it's a little thicker then. But we'll see how it goes here. So it's going to go through and do all the tack down lines. So this is step number 2 in the machine, and it's going to be the tack down lines for the fabric, and it's kind of a little triple stitch. Yeah, they kind of stopped doing the raw edge applique SVG files because I think people were having trouble with, if you get a little bit off in your placement, then the satin or the little triple stitches weren't lining up quite right. So I think that they kind of stopped doing those and having you trim in the hoop. It is a little more accurate with the trimming in the hoop for raw edge applique because there's no over, stitch that goes over the top. Okay, so we got 2 of the R's done. Ready on the 3rd one here. And this is the capital R, so I think it's doing the center first. Yep. So don't forget to trim out those centers. And then, and then it's just the lettering and the little snowflakes and stuff. So there's not too many steps in this block either. Yeah, so this is a pretty heavy little triple stitch that's going to go around there, so it should give you a good base to trim around. But sometimes when I see raw edge, I do a little bit of changing in the software, and I'll put a satin stitch over the top, which is what I did with my original sample. So I do like that a little bit better, but I'm going to try to do it this way to show everybody that it's very possible, and even an old dog can learn new tricks. So well, hopefully we'll get this trimmed and it'll look beautiful, just like the picture of the pillow. All right, getting closer. Got just a little bit left of the bee to do. And then we'll do some trimming. A little hard to see the letter. You probably can't see it very well. My thread's pretty matchy. In fact, I'm going to grab my glasses while this is trimming so I can see the trimming. Okay, so now it's doing the outside edge. Of the bee. And then we'll be ready for trimming. Yeah, they did real short little stitches around there, so it should be fairly easy to trim around there. So. Okay. So I'm going to put my glasses on here. So I can get a little closer. You can probably kind of see the outline. My thread is pretty matchy. And let's go over here and let's work on this bee. And then I probably will turn the camera off for a minute so that, and they said about 1/8 of an inch away, but it's real hard to stay that far away in some areas. So I'm just going to trim. I've got my double curved Ginger scissors. These work wonderfully for this. And I'm going to stay not right up to the stitches, but just a hair away from them, and we're just going to trim it. I think the shape flex is going to help make it a little bit more smooth along the edges. I think it's got a little more body, so it's easier to trim. It is a little thicker, but it seems to be trimming pretty well. And I was hoping maybe it wouldn't ravel quite so much with the shape flex on it. Okay. I think I'm going to trim this little part of the R off just to get this out of my way. There we go. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm trimming it maybe not an eighth. It's not quite an eighth of an inch probably, but it's close. Okay, so there's a little piece here that's kind of hard to get into. So I'm going to kind of work on both sides here. And try to make it as smooth. I kind of stay towards the tip of my scissor because it seems to do the best for me. Oops, I'm stuck under my foot here. In a second. There you go. Because I'm trying to trim on my machine so you can see. Whoops, there goes my glue stick on the floor. All right. Let's go around here. And then down along the bottom. I think this is going to look fine. I think I'm going to like this. I like the shape flex. It seems to just give it a little bit of body. All right, so there's the bee. So we're getting the bee done, okay? And then I got to get in here in the center. So you kind of have to snip. You got to be a little careful not to snip your underneath fabric. So you can get your scissor under there. See if I got under the shape flex. I'm not sure that I did. There we go. Okay, we're going to do the same thing inside there. Let's get this little flap off. Okay. So this might take you just a little bit, but the shape flex does seem to make it a little bit more smooth looking on the edges, and I don't think it's going to ravel quite as bad. Okay, and just be careful when you're poking into the center that you don't get down into your backing. You kind of have to snip a little bit and then stick the point down in there. And mine wants to go under the, haven't got through the shape flex yet. The shape flex is a little bit fibrous, so there we go. So we're going to go around the other side of the bee. This is looking pretty good. I think I'll like this. So I don't normally try something new on video, but you know, this is working out okay. All right. So there is the bee. So then I just have to trim. Oops, I think I need a little bit of trimming down here. Kind of there. So there's the bee. Let me get this kind of out of our way here so you can see the bee a little bit better. Do the top of the R here and get this out of the way. There. So what do you think? I think it looks pretty good. I like the shape flex on there because it just gave it a little more body. It's not quite as ravelly. So now I'm going to turn the camera off and I'm going to continue cutting. I'm going to trim around all my other letters here. And then we'll come back and we'll finish up this little block. Okay, so I got it all trimmed. I think it looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with that shape flex back there. It just gave it it lofted it a little bit too. You know, like the letters, you know, look a little bit raised off the fabric too. So I think that works good, and then it isn't going to be quite so ravelly. All right, so now the next step is going to be the little dot 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 over here. There was a little dot 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 on the after Bur, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the mint julep. And we're going to do those little dots. And then the last step is going to be all the lettering and the swirls and the little snowflakes. And I'm going to do that in black. Okay, so there's the little dots. Get this a little closer so you can see. There's the little dots. You probably can't see them very well. My thread's kind of matching. And then step number 4 in the machine is going to be all the little snowflakes and the lettering. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to switch this over to black to do that. I think the original pillow was done in black, the little black polka dots, but my kit came with navy blue, and I kind of like the navy blue, so I could have done a navy blue lettering here too. That would be really pretty, a real dark navy blue. But I'm going to go ahead and use the black. And it's going to do Baby, It's Cold Outside, and then the little swirls and the little snowflakes. So I'll get it started here so you can see it sewing, and then I'll pause the camera while it's stitching out all the little, it's going to do a little snowflake first. And then it's going to do, I think maybe the little swirl. Oh, it's going to go up and do this other snowflake. So I'll go ahead and pause the camera while this is doing this little stitching, and then we'll come back and see the finished block. Okay, so we're all done sewing. There are going to be some little jump clips in here because it's a lot of little small little letters. So I was going to show you again, I think I showed you in the last video, a little bit about, I love these little Kimber tweezers. They're so thin and they got a really sharp point. And then one side of them is actually a little blade, so it helps you cut things. But they also have a little pair of scissors that are wonderful. And then I also have a pair that are from Floriani, and those are all on ShieldSewingCenter.com. These are my Floriani, they call micro tip scissors. See, they have that teeny little tiny blade. And I showed you my other scissors before, but these are the Kimber ones, and they're really tiny too. And these are great for jump clips. So I like to grab these little jump clips, like here's one here with this tweezer, like this. And then I can slip that tiny little blade of this little micro tip scissor that's in that same set. This is in the Kimber set. And then I can trim that little jump clip, and it gets it a little bit better because I can grab a hold of it, of the little tail, like here's a little tail, and I can get down there and I can get a hold of it a little bit better. So you'll have to do a few little, a little bit of trimming on these because there's some little spaces, and if you got a jump clipper on your machine, or even if you don't, you're still going to have to trim these. So I'm going to do a few of those, but then those are the two little, these are the Kimber micro tips that are in that little set. And then these, I love these little tweezers because they're really tight and they're very sharp on the end, so you can really get down underneath all those teeny little, I've always struggled with jump clips, these little teeny ones, getting a hold of them, and these really work well like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish up my clipping my little jump clips with my tweezers and my little scissors, micro tip scissors. And then this block is done. I took the snowflake block out that we did before, and then you want to just kind of press it. I'm going to leave the stabilizer on because we're going to trim these in a little bit. But I just kind of pressed it along the edges just to lay it flat again, so when I get ready to trim it, it'll be easier. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. Don't trim like this one. Don't press down on your applique glitter, because otherwise you'll melt it with your iron. I just did along the edges. And then this one I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to finish doing my jump clips, and then I'm going to take it out and just press it down and leave the stabilizer on, and because we're going to trim it with the stabilizer on. And then I'll be coming back to do the third block. So we'll do the little penguin block next. Okay, so we're going to move on to the third block. So we've done our snowflake and our burr, and now we're going to move on to the little block up here, the little penguin. So he's kind of cute. He's got some applique, and then he's got some fringed earmuffs. So we're going to do some fringe on this one, like we did on the first little snowman. He had little fringed earmuffs too. So we're going to, this is the next one we're going to work on. Okay, so you got a small piece of background fabric with the shape flex on the back. Then this is going to be the little head applique with the little polka dots. And then this is the face part, you know, the white part. So I did put shape flex on the back of this just to keep the black from bleeding through quite so much. So it doesn't, you can still see it just a little, but I thought it looked much better with the shape flex on the back. Okay, so I've got my shape flex. This is my backing fabric, and I'm going to go to a tearaway instead of a cutaway cutaway stabilizer, and I'm going to turn this over to the back, and I'm going to use my fabric glue stick, and this is again in a 4x4 hoop. So I'm going to go ahead and put some fabric glue stick on the back of my fabric, and I'm going to try to center this as best I can on the stabilizer. It's a little bit narrow. I can't remember the size on this one. It must have been about 4.5 by 6.5 or something like that. It's kind of narrow and wider. I know it's 6.5. I think it's 4.5 by 6.5. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do the best I can to center it. And then I'm going to get my 4x4 hoop, and I'm also going to do the eyeball method again and kind of center this. So with this one, you're not going to be hooped on the top and the bottom, but you will on the sides. So I'm just kind of centering it the best I can in the hoop here. And then whoops, I can move my other part of my hoop over here. Oh, I'm about to have help. Sorry, guys. You may see an orange cat go across here. I'm going to go ahead and center that the best I can in the hoop. That looks pretty good. Actually, it could come down a little bit, so I might just bring it down this way just a little bit. There we go. That's better. It doesn't need to be perfect, so it'll be fine. There's plenty of fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. And this is such a cute block. I love the fringe. So we'll tighten this up. Again, this is tearaway, so it said to use cutaway. Now we are going to use cutaway in the last block, but I prefer tearaway for most of the blocks. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the machine. I've got my little January little penguin head up in my machine ready to embroider. And the first step is going to be the placement line for his little head, so the little black part. So I do have black thread in my machine and the black embroidery thread, and then I have my still my number 11 needle and my embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin. Okay, so whoops, second here. Mustn't I hit embroidery? I'm sure all of you do that occasionally too. If you don't hit embroidery before you hit go, it doesn't like it. So here's going to be our little placement line for the little head of the penguin. This is going to be the black polka dots. Just going to lay that over that. This will be an easy one. Now they do give you the SVG files for all of these, but these are such simple shapes. It's just easier to try. I just trim them in the hoop. I do like to use my scan and cut for some appliques, like I did with that snowflake, because they are very intricate and they're kind of hard to trim in the hoop. So that's the ones I usually do, and a lot of lettering is the other ones I do in the scan and cut. But these simple shapes, it's just fast to do it in the hoop. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, and it shows in the instructions to do the trimming, and we're going to trim all the way around close to the stitches. I've got my Kimber double curved scissors here that I'm doing that with. And this is going to have like a motif stitch on it. So my tack down stitch that I just did, you kind of want it to match your whatever you're going to use for your motif again, because it will show through just a little bit. And I chose the black to match his little head. So, okay. Got some strings here. All right. And then this next step, let me turn the page here so I know what I'm doing. The next step is going to be his little face. So I am going to change to my white thread. I like to change the thread for the placement and the tack down. That way I don't forget to change it. So I am going to put my white in now for the little center of his face. Okay, so it's going to do the placement line. This is step number 3 in the machine. This has been one of my favorite little pit bench buddies. I love them all. They're so fun they're so easy to love. But this one was really fun because it had all these little elements to it, so it's kind of fun. Different, and you put it together in pieces. So, okay. So now we're going to place our fabric wherever oh, here it is. And I have the shape flex on the back so that it won't bleed through quite so much. And I'm going to go ahead and place it over my placement line. And then step number 4 in the machine is going to be the tack down line. And then we're going to trim this one. And again, this is going to be kind of a motif stitch, so I would tell you to use the tack down stitch in the same color that you want to use your decorative stitch. And I chose white. Okay, so we're going to trim this one now. Hopefully I got it right side up. Looks like I did. Yep. Sometimes I have trouble with these white on whites. They're so close on both sides that even when I put the stick flex on, I notice it. Okay, so I'm going to trim around this one. There's going to be a little decorative motif stitch around here. Okay, just about, there we go. Okay, so there's our little trimmed patch. All right, now the next step is number 5, and it's going to be his little eyeballs. So I'm going to switch back to black here for his little eyes. I'm looking forward to doing the January pillows, or I'm sorry, the February pillows, because they have really cute little things, elements in them, so I think everybody will enjoy that. All right, so we're going to sew out his little eyes in the black. All right, and we got one of those little jumps in there, so I'm going to grab my little microtip scissors again and my little pair of tweezers and grab a hold. See, I've always got these little tails, so sometimes I can get them better with the tweezers. This one's not going to be particularly nice, so I'm going to grab it with my fingers. There we go. But these, then I can grab these ones in the middle are so nice to grab with those little tweezers, and you can get closer when you go to trim them with those little microtip scissors. Here, I'll show you the little, this is the box for Kimber. There's a couple more pairs of scissors. These are little duckbills. I'm not a big duckbill fan, but these are really small and they do real well for the applique. And then they have a little pair of the little squeezy scissors, the little ones that you squeeze, and those are really sharp on the tips usually. So that's the 4 little pieces. Then you get the little pair of microtips and the little pair of tweezers. And that's it. And this is up on the website. It's just under Kimber scissor set, I think is what it is. So, and it comes in that pretty little can. All right, so now we got that little clip done, and then the next step is number 6, and that's going to be his little nose. So we'll get some orange. He needs to have a beak. So I'm going to get my orange here, and I think I used the same color as in the other one, orange peel. This is one of my favorite oranges. It's kind of a golden orange. Brother has a very, very nice set of thread now, and they used to only have like 60 colors, and now they have 314, and I'm super happy with them for photo stitch as well. So I pretty much switched over to Brother thread. It's very consistent. I have very little breakage, very little shredding. I mean, every thread will break occasionally or shred occasionally, but it's very rare. I mean, I can sew a whole day and not have any shreds at all with this. So, and it runs through my 10 needle very well also. All right, so there's this little beak. So now I think we're ready to go on to the decorative stitches. Let's see. I need to turn my page again. And I think the next one, oh, it's the white on the inside. So we're going to put the white back in and do the decorative stitch around the white side of part of his head. All right. And Tim put a new blade on my cutter on the side of my machine, and now everything threads. I'm so excited. It's just those little things in life. My blade that, you know, you cut off over here on the side was dull, and some of the threads then wouldn't thread in the needle, because when you pulled it across, you know, it was kind of dull, so that it would hold the thread really tight, and then the needle threader wouldn't grab it. So it's so nice to have my needle threader back. So this is doing that little decorative stitch around his little face. And I think the next step will be the little head, the black part of his head. So I'm going to switch back to the black for that. And it also gives him some little hairs on the top. It puts a couple little hairs on the top of his head. It's so cute. This is one of my favorite blocks. I like the little penguin. All right. Okay, so it's going to do that little cute little decorative stitch and then add the little hairs at the top of his head. I used a different color for the earmuffs when I did this the first time, and I can't find my spool of thread, so I guess we're going to do a different red than I did the first time I did these. So I'll have to I'll have to look through all my drawers to see if I put it in the wrong spot. Haven't found it yet. I didn't think I ran out. So it is doing like a motif stitch again. That's why they tell you to put to do the tack down stitches in, you know, a matching thread, because you might see your tack down stitch just a little bit. All right, and it's going to go back up and do the little top knot on the top of his head. He has to have a little hair, you know, make him cool. There we go. All right, there's his little hair on the top of his head. Okay, so now comes the fun part. So now it's going to do the little earmuffs, and those are going to be fringe. So we talked a little bit about the fringe in the first video on the little snowman, because he had the same little earmuffs on. And so it's going to do the same thing. It's going to do some satin stitches, and then we're going to trim through the bobbin thread to release those and make little earmuffs. So I'm going to go ahead and put my red thread in. We'll get it started so you can see what it's going to do. I think it does the little headband first, I think. And then I'll show you what it's going to do for the fringe. They do like a trapping stitch. They do a kind of a wide satin stitch, and then they do kind of a trapping stitch that holds the larger satin stitch in place. So when you trim the bobbin thread in the back, it won't release all those threads, you know, and have them come loose in the front. So this is just a regular satin stitch for the little earmuff band. I really like my other red. I hope I can find it. It's called Berry Red, and I have no idea what I did with it. I usually put all my threads in the box with the project, and somewhere along the line I either dropped it or something, and I can't find it, so I'll look for it tonight. Maybe I just stuck it in the drawer in the wrong spot. All right, so there's his little headband. And then it's going to start working on his little earmuffs. And I think there's going to be the same number of little spots. 1, 2, 3, yeah, 5 little spots that will trim on the back. So there'll be little layers. So it's going to do these really long ones, satin stitches. And then it goes back and does a really, really little short satin stitch on the top of it to hold it in place, so it's like a trapping stitch. And here's those long ones again. Those are the ones that are going to end up being fringe. And then it'll go along the top of them with a really narrow little satin stitch to hold them in place again. I think satin stitches or fringe is really cool. I'd like to digitize some. I think I know how to do it after watching some of these sew now. You know, you do the long satin stitches and then you do a trapping stitch. So we may have to make fringe one of these days in the software class. I've learned a lot about digitizing by watching things sew. So if you watch things sew, you can figure out how to digitize them and make them yourself. That looks pretty cool. So there's another set. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for just a moment while this is finishing up. It's going to finish doing this side and then go over and do the other side. And then I think there's one more line that it has to do, and then we will do the trimming. Okay, we're just about finished with the earmuffs here. Just did the last little trapping stitch on the top. Okay, now the last step, and in the instructions it tells you to go ahead and do the fringing now, but I usually wait until I'm all done sewing to the fringing. So the next step is going to be, I'm going to go jump ahead a couple of steps in the book and do the little trimming line. There's a little line that's going to go along the bottom of the little penguin, because that's where we're going to trim it when we go to trim the blocks up to put them together. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the red in for that, because then I can see the line really well. And then we'll do the fringe. Okay, so that was the last step. That was step number 10 in the instructions, or on the machine. Okay, so now we're ready to do the fringing, and we're going to do the fringing the same way that we did for the little snowman earlier. There's 5 little sections, and you can see these are a little easier to see. I noticed that the bobbin thread shows a little bit more on this particular design than the other one. Got to find my seam ripper here just a second. So I like to use my seam ripper. You can use a scissors if you like, whatever works for you. I usually use my seam ripper, and I'm just going to slide my seam ripper underneath the bobbin threads and just do a little bit at a time, and just slide it under there. And then there's 5 sections. So that was the first top section, and here's the second one. Okay, and then here's the middle one, and the 4th one. I usually work from the top down. Seems to work better for me. And then here's the bottom one. This one's a little tight, so it's a little harder to get in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to flip this over then, and I like to use my little the back side of the seam ripper and just kind of wiggle it back and forth to loosen up those ends. And sometimes I need to use my thumbnail too, so I'm just going to kind of get them started, and then I'll go back. I think I'm going to have to go back with my thumbnail too. Sometimes they're a little bit hesitant to come out. There we go. So let's see. So I'm going to kind of, there we go. That's working better. All right. So I use kind of a combination. Let's see if I can get the top row in. That looks better. That was kind of a tight one. Those are really cute little earmuffs. Isn't it cute? I think I've got a stray hair. So like if you got a stray hair there, you know, you can trim it off. And let's see. I'm going to put my glasses on to see if I've got any more strays in there. Every now and then, you know, you kind of cut through one of the loops and you get a little stray hair that wants to stick up. So there's kind of a spot that didn't come loose here, so let's check. Get it better. That looks better. Got a couple little spots in here too. There we go. There we go. Looks better. Okay, so let's do the other side. So I'm going to turn it back over. And we'll start at the top here. Let's see. This one is always hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I always got to make sure I'm cutting in this right spot. So get this one. Now I am left-handed, so I'm holding my seam ripper in the left hand. So if you're right-handed, you're going to be pushing the other direction. And this is the middle one. Looks pretty good. Yeah, so I think we might play with fringe. I've never really digitized fringe. I like it. So we might try some. That might be a fun software class. Okay, so there's the trimming done, and then I'm going to flip it over, and let's take the seam ripper and just get them started. The second set. when there's that many layers, sometimes you have to kind of go back and work with your fingernail too, because they like to get caught and then you don't notice it. But can you see the little trapping stitches in there? It's like when you do the layers, do you see how there's the little teeny narrow satin stitches in there? That's what's holding it together so that they, these won't all fall out. I'm not quite got all these loose here. The middle likes to get stuck, kind of. There we go. It's better. Got a kind of a stray one, don't I? There's one stuck down in here. Let's see. Maybe I didn't catch it. Let's see. Make sure I got through all the bobbin threads down here. Sometimes when you have like shape flex and a bunch of stuff on the fabric, the little threads like to kind of stick into the fabric a little bit. There we go. All right, so he's got a couple stray hairs here, so we'll give him a little trim. There. This one's kind of sticking out. Give this one a little trim. There. There he is. He's got his little earmuffs. Isn't he cute? Look at those little earmuffs. I like that. So cute. Looks like I still got a stray hair, don't I? Did I get it? Maybe I got it. There. All right, so now I'm ready to take him out of the hoop. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to press this down like I did my other two blocks. I'm going to press this down with the iron just to press it flat, so when we get ready to do the trimming, it'll be much easier. And we're going to go on to the fourth block, though, which is going to be this patchwork block. So we're going to do this one next, okay? So before we do the trimming, we'll do all the trimming together at the same time. All right, so I'm going to pause the video for a minute, and I'm going to set up for the last block. Okay, so I'm all set up for the final block, and this is the Crazy Patch block. So I did go ahead and put a no-show mesh in my 5x7 hoop. So you're just going to hoop your stabilizer, and this stabilizer will just leave in the block, in the pillow. So, and then you need all of the little pieces. I think it was 6 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 6 pieces of your fabric, and these are all the same size, even though they don't really need to be, but it depends on where you want to put them. So you can put them in any order you want. So they just had you cut them the same size. Okay. All right. So what this is going to be, it's not flip and fold. When I first looked at it, I thought, oh, it's going to be, flipping. It's going to be like embroidery by number, but this one's actually just applique. So it's just going to be appliqued on the stabilizer. So the first thing that's going to stitch out is just going to be a placement line for the first block. So I've got the design in the machine already. I'm going to sew out my placement line. And I'm going to kind of put them in the order I did on my other pillows. So there's no right or wrong way to do these. You can just do them any way you want. Now the trick with these, any fabric that is outside of the placement line, you can kind of see the white placement, and I just used white thread. I'm going to piece the whole thing with white, okay? So any of the fabric that is outside of these lines, you need to leave on, because that's going to be in the seam allowance, okay? So just make sure you leave some fabric on the outside in there. So I'm going to go ahead and place this, and I want to make sure I leave enough on each side, okay, for a little seam allowance, and then on the bottom, and then on the top here. So, so I'm going to cover that placement line, and then step number 2, whoops, it's being contrary, there we go, is going to be the tack down stitch. But we're not going to trim any of the fabric that's on the outside edges. We're just going to trim the fabric that's on the inside. So in this case, it's basically just across the top section here, okay? Because we want to leave this in here so that there's something for us to use as a seam allowance. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and so we're going to trim here and then down this side close to the stitches. like that. This we're going to leave so that we can use that for the seam allowance. Okay. Now the next step, this is step number 3 in the machine, is going to be the placement line for the next piece, which is going to be kind of a triangular piece. And I think I used this one. Let me find the color I used. I'd gotten some kits originally for these. It's fun to get kits because then I know what colors of fabrics and stuff to use, because I have trouble picking fabrics sometimes. So I ordered some kits from my girlfriend's quilt shop out in Logan, Utah. And then I cut, you know, like matching kits for the second pillow, because I always do 2 sets. So, all right, so here is our second placement line. And I just, like, again, I just used, I just have the bobbin thread in the bobbin and white embroidery thread. And we need to do the same thing. So see, we're going to need to leave some fabric out here. And so make sure that you get it so that there's going to be a little fabric on the outside edge over here. Get it all covered up. And this is not actually going to go out to the outside. There's going to be another piece of fabric in there, so we don't have to worry about on this side. Okay. And then step number 4 is going to tack this down. And then we'll trim again. So we're basically just going to be trimming the bottom and the top of the triangle. It's kind of triangular, this piece. So we're just going to trim, and we're going to leave this out here because we want it in the seam allowance. So I'm going to trim along here, and it shows good pictures in the instructions. So I'm going to trim along there, and I'm going to trim along the top. Like that. Okay. Gotta turn my page. So the next step is going to be a placement line again for, there's going to be a little small piece that's going to fit in here. And this is going to be the placement line. So this is step number 5 on the machine. This is going to fill in that little space that we left open over there. Now this one, of course, this little piece is much smaller than this big piece, but they just had you cut them all the same size so that you had, you know, you could choose where you want to put them. So I'm actually just going to turn this the other direction. I need to make sure I leave some out here for the seam allowance. I'm just going to turn it the other way so that I can use a little bit of the bottom of it for something else. Okay. And step number 6 is going to be the tack down line for this piece. Now remember, we're not going to trim out here because this needs to stay in our seam. Okay, so we're going to trim along the bottom here, like this. So we want this to stay in the seam here. I'll lay that behind me so I can use that little piece for something else. And then I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to trim here. Okay, and then I'm going to trim down, but I'm not going to trim along this edge. I'm just going to trim straight down over here. Like that. Okay. And we're going to leave this little piece out here for the seam. Okay. So we got another piece to do. There were 6 pieces. So this is actually very simple, and it's got a really cute decorative stitch over it. So, okay, so the next step is going to be another placement line. This is step number 7. And this is going to be for, I think I'm going to use my plaid. I love this plaid fabric. They have a whole bunch of colors in this plaid. And again, this one's going to be on the outside edge, so we want to make sure that there's some fabric over here. Okay, let's see how we can put this in. So I think it'll work this way. And just put it in whichever way you want. I think that'll be okay. And then I'll have a little space over here for the seam allowance. And then step number 8 is going to tack it down. And then we'll trim this one. Lots of trimming on this one. Okay, so again, we're going to leave this fabric out here though. We're just going to trim along here. And I might keep the bottom of this one too, because I can use that for something else. And then I'm going to trim along here. And then I'm going to trim along here. This side. And then we're going to flip it over and we're going to trim along here. But not this side. Like that. Okay. So there's our trimmed piece. We got 4 pieces and we got a couple to go yet here. And this is going to be, I got to look on my other pillow to see which one I use. So this is going to be the little piece up in here. It's kind of a triangular piece. So step number 9 is going to be the placement line for that piece of fabric. And we're going to have an edge on this one again too. I'm going to use my other green. And this is going to take most of our fabric because it's a pretty good sized piece. Okay. The biggest piece was the bottom piece. So let's see. I think we can do it this way. Make sure it goes over far enough though. So I've got this little corner right here. So we got to make sure we can get that covered. I think that's okay. All right. Looks like I got some thread on this one. Okay, there we go. So then number 10 in the machine is going to be the tack down line. This was a real fun, easy one. And it turned out so cute. I really like the decorative fills they used on that. Okay, so then we're going to do the trimming. Now remember, we want to leave this out here. So we're going to trim up this side. That way. I'm going to keep that one too. I think that'll be a good piece that I can use for something. And then, whoops, I'm going to pull this out so I can get to the other side. So this side, and we're going to, I don't think you can see me. So we're going to trim down this way. Like this. Okay. And then we're going to leave this side in because we need that for the seam allowance. All right, we got one last placement line. So this is step number 11. We're going to do the last placement line at the top here. When I do this type of applique, or like it's going to be the block, I normally use cutaway. But when I do the other type of applique blocks that we just did, I usually use tearaway. So there'll be a little mixture of stabilizers in this one, but it'll work just perfectly. All right. So now, of course, we need to have some fabric around the edge here. Okay. So make sure you get it up high enough that you get a little bit on the side, and then we still got this tip. So we got to be a little careful we get this tip all the way over here. I think that'll be good. And then I'm going to stitch number 12, which will be that tack down line. Sometimes I have to hold the fabric a little bit when I do use the no-show. I notice that things want to wrinkle just a little, so I often have to hold it down. You could tape it down too if you'd like. I always hit the tape though, so I don't tape unless I have to. Okay, so here's our little seam. So we're not going to trim along here. We're just going to basically trim right along this edge. And see, I've got a nice big piece here that I can use for something else. Okay, like that. So there's all the pieces. So step number 13 then in the machine is going to be the satin stitch that's going to cover up all those raw seams. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to leave my white in. I've already got the white in. So I'm going to leave my white in, and I'm going to do my underneath satin stitches. You can see it on here in the white. And then I'm going to do all these pretty decorative stitches in a blue over the top. Okay. So we'll get this started, and then I'll pause the video so you don't have to sit here and watch the whole thing go. But it's going to cover up all those raw edges and then get us ready for some crazy patch cute decorative stitches that go over the top of those. They do good satin stitches. Kimber does really well with their satin stitches, and they're nice. They cover really well. They're a little wider than some places, so that everything covers nicely. So I like that. All right, so this is going to be the satin stitching, and I'll go ahead and pause the video for a little bit while it's working, and then I'll come back when it's about done, and then we'll start doing the crazy patch decorative stitches. Okay, so we got all the satin stitches done, and now we're ready to do all those cute crazy quilt stitches. And they do it in 3 sections, so if you want to use multiple colors you can. So like it does this one, and then it does a couple of other pieces in another color. You know, it stops in between, but I actually just all want mine the same color, so I'm going to use this kind of it's called Baby Blue 2. I'm going to use that color for all of mine, and I was going to show you a little trick that if you don't want to have to sit here and push the button after, you know, each color stop, if you want it just to continue on sewing, I'll show you how to do that, because there's a lot of the machines, not all, but a lot of the Brother Baby Lock machines have this button, and then you can just make it continue to sew, so you don't have to sit here and push the button in between if you want them all the same color. So in this case, I want them all the same color. So I'm going to go over here to my screen for a second. And if I go into layout, some of the machines are going to say edit here instead of layout. If I open this up, so there's a little button right here that looks like a spool thread with little dots underneath. That's the monochrome button. So if I touch that and then I hit layout again, see how they're all grayed out now? So now they won't stop in between. They'll just keep on sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and just let it sew for the same color for all of my crazy quilt stitches, but you can do more colors if you want. I just wanted mine all the same. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got my excuse me, my blue thread in there, and I'm going to go ahead and get these started, and I'll probably pause the video again while it works, because it's going to take a little bit, and it's going to do all these cute decorative stitches over the top of those satin stitches. And I just wanted mine kind of subtle, so I made them all this kind of light, kind of a, well, it's baby blue, but it's kind of a sky. Excuse me, I have a dry throat today. So it's going to do that one. And then this one's going to be the next one over here. I think it did a couple of rounds over that one. It did like 2, it's like a little flower. And then it's going to go down to these. But this way it's not going to stop in between the 3 colors, color changes, so that I can just let it go and I don't have to sit here and watch it. So, all right, so I'll go ahead and pause the video while this is stitching, and then I will show you the finished block. Okay, so it's all done with the decorative stitches, and with that monochrome button pressed, I didn't have to start and stop it. So here's all the little decorative stitches with that baby blue. I thought they were nice and subtle. You can still see them, but I didn't want it to be like grabbing me, so I liked that lighter blue. Okay, so there's my block. My block is all done. And I'm going to go ahead, let me turn my page to make sure I didn't miss anything. So then we're going to go ahead and remove this from the hoop, and we're going to be doing all the trimming together. So I'm going to have to move the camera for a minute. Takes me a minute to move the camera. So I'm going to move the camera over to my cutting table so we can trim all of our blocks so we're ready to put them together. Okay, so we're going to trim these blocks. Each one needs to be trimmed to a certain size. So I'm going to start with the Snowflake block. It needs to be trimmed to 4.5 by 4.5. And now I would highly recommend, if you don't already have them, to get the orange pop rulers, the Kimber orange pop rulers, because these are so awesome. You can see what you're doing. You can get things trimmed in, put it evenly in the hoop. I really do like them, and they've been so much easier to trim with. If you don't care for cutting on the insides, you'll see as I cut these, I'm going to be cutting on the inside of the hoop of the ruler. If it's hard for you to do that, just take a marking pencil and mark, and then you can cut with a regular rotary ruler and blade to finish them off. So Okay, so what's neat about these though is that you can see in the center and you can visually center this up. So I noticed that, I'm not quite centered here in the hoop. So I'm just kind of, centering it visually the way I want it. And, you can see there's a little piece of fabric over here because obviously I wasn't quite centered when I put it in the hoop, but that's fine. Okay, so we can do that. And then I like to lay, they call them orange pop rulers because they all lay inside of each other. So this is the 4.5 by 4.5 inch block square ruler. And then I want to put the next size up on there just to help me hang on to the fabric so it doesn't scooch on me or anything. So, okay. So then the trick with these is you're going to be working, now I'm left-handed, so I have my rotary cutter in my left hand. I'm going to slide it this way and I'm going to be working on the right, always on the right. So if you're right-handed, you're going to be working on the left, okay? Because you need to put the outside of your blade against the inside of this ruler. So I'm going to lay my ruler or my rotary blade down in there and I'm going to pull back into the corner because there's little slots, and then I'm going to slowly push upward to the other slot. The trick is with these is to be diligent, work slowly with them, and you will get used to cutting on the inside. It took me a little while, so I'm very careful when I cut with them because I have a tendency to go whoop like this, and then I have a bad cut. So I just am very careful when I cut with them. Make sure your rotary blades are sharp because that really helps a lot. Now you notice I'm working on a mat here that turns. This is a Martelli roundabout. Most awesome tool ever. And I love this because then I can turn, and it turns. It has like a Lazy Susan under it. So let me pull this up so you can see. It has a Lazy Susan, and this one actually turns. I've had other mats like this in the past, and they just don't turn. They kind of turn part way, and then they'll kind of grab. This one really turns because it has a Lazy Susan underneath. Also comes with an ironing mat, which is really nice. Sometimes you need to iron and turn things, so I like that too. So here's our first block. It's 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches square. Okay, now you notice that I left the stabilizer on, so I just pressed these down and I left the stabilizer on. Now I'm going to pull the stabilizer off. This is that tear away, one of them I'm just going to pull off as much as I can. Doesn't need to be all of it. But I find that the blocks, I think they trim better if you leave the stabilizer on. So I always leave it on until I'm done trimming, and then I pull off what I can, like that. So that's plenty. All right. So there's our first block. Get the stabilizer out of the way. So there's our little snowflake block. Now the Bur block is also going to be 4.5 by 4.5. So I'm going to put this in the center of my cutting mat, and I'm going to also visually center this one in the hoop. See, it looks like I'm a little close. We need to go this way. I was a little bit to the right, evidently, when I got these in there, so looks better. I'm not the best, I don't always get it perfect, but I can compensate with this. It works just fine. It looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna drop the one size bigger ruler on there so that I can have something more to hang on to. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm cutting with my left hand, so I'm working on the right. Those of you with cutting on the right, you're going to work on the left. I'm going to lay the inside of my blade against the inside of the ruler. I'm going to pull back into the corner and then push forward. And just do this slowly. You may want to take some scrap fabrics and practice a little bit because it is a little bit of a strange feeling at first. But these work so well, and they're very common sizes of blocks, so they work for not just Kimber products, but all kinds of blocks. So I use them all the time. Okay. So this was also 4.5 inches, and again, you saw that I left the stabilizer on there. Pull this off. There's our Bur block. Okay, and then I'm going to turn this over and pull some of the stabilizer off, if I can get a hold of it. There we go. It doesn't need to be all of it. Just, get as much of it off as you can. But I found when I go to put these together that if there's a lot of cutaway stabilizer, the blocks have a tendency kind of, I don't know, wrinkle or something. I don't know. They have kind of a funny little wrinkly spots to them because of the cutaway isn't giving. And see, this shape flex kind of gives. So I just take the stabilizer out. I like to use tearaway. Because normally you use tearaway stabilizer on things that do not stretch. And you use cutaways on stretchy items. That's the kind of general rule. And of course, this is not stretchy. This is cotton fabric. So that's why I usually use tearaway. But I did use the cutaway on that Crazy Cat patch block because of the way it was done. I didn't think the tearaway would hold well. I mean, the satin stitches are holding the pieces together on this. The satin stitches are holding the pieces together on this, but I thought it needed to have a base. So that's why I did this one with the cutaway. Okay, so there. Got most of the stabilizer off of that. And there's our Bur Block. You know, I actually kind of like that raw edge applique. I thought it kind of, you know, with the shape flex on the back, see, it kind of stands up a little bit. It's kind of cool. I like that. So there's that block. All right, so the next block is going to be this block. And so I pressed it a little bit on the outside edge. With this no-show mesh, be careful not to have your iron too hot because the iron, this is kind of tender, so it doesn't like a hot iron. All right, and then I'm going to go with, now it doesn't tell you to, and technically if you measure this is about 4.5 by 6.5, but sometimes when you have this large block, it kind of like squishes in a little bit. So I'm going to use my orange pop ruler. That's 4.5 by 6.5 to do this. So I'm going to lay this down. And those lines that are around the outside edges will help me center it. And you can see that the lines, you can see the lines fairly well on the bottom and the top. The sides are pretty good. But the bottom and the top is a little bit off because it, you know, the fabric pulled in a little bit with the satin stitches. So this worked better to use the orange pop ruler. So I'm going to get that. This is the 4.5 by 6.5 rectangle, and then I got the next size bigger to set on top of it here. And we're going to make sure I didn't move it. I think I kind of moved it. That no-show mesh is a little scoochy. It's a little shiny, so it kind of scoots a little bit. There we go. I think I need to go up just a little bit more. There. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing. So I used the orange pop ruler to do this as well. So I'm going to go ahead. I think I moved it again. Having a little trouble tonight. There we go. There. Okay. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to put my blade down along the inside edge, and I'm going to push back to the corner, and then I'm going to slowly go up, and then turn. And do each side, and like I said, I am quite deliberate when I do this. I take my time because I have missed a few times and so I do kind of take my time using these rulers, and I've really become accustomed to them. I like them very much. Okay. And those are also on the website. All the stuff's up on shieldsewingcenter.com if you don't already have it. Now I can ship it to you. All right, so there's our 4.5 by 6.5 inch crazy patch block. And then see, this one I left the stabilizer on the back. So we'll just leave the stabilizer on. Okay. So then the last block is going to have a little different trimming. This one, we're going to square it to 4.5 by 2.5 with the penguin on the bottom edge of the block. So I'm going to line my 4.5 by 4.5 inch square block ruler on the cut line. So this, remember that last little line, that red line? That's why I made it red so I could see it. That one is going to be on the bottom of the ruler. Okay, so we're going to put the bottom of the ruler right along that line. Okay, and I think I'm kind of looking at the bottom edge of the little penguin too to make sure he looks straight. Now you can see that I wasn't very straight with my getting my fabric in there, but it'll be straight when we're done here. So I'm going to put that red line along the inside bottom edge, okay? And then it says to trim the 3 edges. So we're just going to trim these 3 edges, okay? And I don't think on this one, since I'm just doing the 3, well, I might still put it on. Sometimes I still like to put this bigger one on because it's just easier to hang on to. And that looks pretty good. I got this kind of crooked, but it'll be fine when we're done. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. This one was kind of a specialty cut because we had to use that line to help us. So I'm going to twist this around and do the bottom. And do the other side. And I still got the stabilizer in there. So I leave the stabilizer in there. All right. So there's our little guy. And then it says there's another trim the excess fabric from the top of the block so the block measures 2.5 inches tall. So we want to measure from the bottom here to up here and get 2.5 inches. So with that one, I'm going to grab my other ruler. Second here, get my other ruler. And it's easier for me to see the 2.5 inch mark on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and place the 2.5 inch mark on the bottom of the block. Make sure it's nice and straight. So here's 1, 2.5. So I check it to make sure that I don't mess it up. And then I'm going to cut across the top. Like that. And now it's 2.5 inches by 4.5 inches. Okay, so there's our little guy. He's going to go on top of the little crazy patch block like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go turn it over, and this one also had stabilizer on it, so I'm going to go ahead, whoops, if I can get a hold of it, pull the stabilizer off much as I can. But I do like to trim them with the stabilizer. I think it holds the block more firmly flat, and that way you get a nice even cut also. So there's our little guy. So he's 2.5 by 4.5. So I'm going to have to move the camera back so we can go ahead. I'm standing at my cutting table. It's a lot easier to cut over here. And then now we're going to move on to the sewing of the top together. So I'll pause the video for a moment and move all my stuff again, and then we will start doing the assembly. Okay, so now we're ready to do the sewing here. We're going to sew all of our little blocks together to make the top. And then we're going to put the backing on and put the binding on. So this one's going to have binding. All right, so I'm going to go ahead a second here. Raise my camera up just a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and put the Bur block on top of the little snowflake one. And I'm going to see if there's a different, particular way that I want my snowflake to go. Let's see. I think I like that way. You might have to kind of flip it around until you get it the way you want it. I think I like it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and put these right sides together. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam. And so what I usually use on my machine is the Q02 piecing stitch on my Brother machine. And almost all the Brother machines have the same stitch. It's a piecing stitch. It has the letter P, and it moves the needle to the right. And then you can run your fabric right along the edge of your J-foot. So that makes a nice 1/4 inch seam. Okay, and I have some, actually I have some navy blue Metler thread in my needle and bobbin. It happens to be polyester. I normally do this with cotton, but I didn't have any navy blue, so that's on my to-do list for tomorrow, is to get some navy blue cotton thread. I have every color except cotton, or except navy blue, evidently. So I'm going to go ahead and run this along my J-foot. I've got my Q02 piecing stitch selected, and then we're going to stitch these little blocks together. So we'll do the Bur and the, I'm going to back up a stitch here so I can lock it off. There we go. I'm doing the Bur in the Snowflake block first, and then we're going to sew the little penguin on the top of the other block. So there's Bur and the snowflake, and then we're going to sew the little penguin guy, and this is the way it's supposed to go with this piece on the top. So get these lined up, and then we will sew the little penguin on top of the crazy stitch block, crazy patch block, I think is what they called it. Okay, having a little trouble getting things lined up today. There we go. I'll lock that off. And then do my 1/4 inch seam across. And then lock up on the other side. I like the locking stitch, so I'm using the little polka dot button. It's on most of the machines now. I'll tip the camera up so you can see right here. I like this instead of doing the backup stitch because I always have a problem with the backup, it seems. Okay, so in this case, I normally would open these up, but this block is kind of thick, so I am going to go ahead and just press the seams down, and I'm just going to finger press this because this is going to be a little harder to iron because I don't want to get this meshy stabilizer all wrinkly, so I don't really want to iron that with a real hot iron. So I'm just going to finger press that down nicely. And then these, I think I will try to press these open, and I might just finger press them, or I could run over to the iron here real quick. Let's see how it goes. If I can get it to finger press open enough, I might just go touch it with the iron. But you have to be a little careful because, you know, you got vinyl underneath here. On the back, it should be fine if you don't have your iron too hot. So let me just press this down real quick. Okay, so there's our two little pieces, and now we're going to go ahead and sew these two together. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to flip these right sides together, and then we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam and sew the two halves together. What a cute project. This was really fun. Let's see how Jan did with her cutting. I'm not a very good cutter, guys, so sometimes I come a little off. I'm a little off. I have a hard time cutting. I've never been very slick with a rotary cutter. Okay. So let's go ahead and do our 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to lock this off up here. This was such a fun pillow. I'm anxious to do the February ones because they're really cute, and they have like vinyls and different stuff on them. They have some new stuff on them, so they're really fun. They even have confetti in them, so they're really cute pillows and fun to do. All right, down to the other end. I'm going to cut that off. Okay, and there's the pillow top. Isn't that cute? And I think I will take this over to my iron quickly, and I'll finger press this open, but I'll take it over before I put it together and give it a good press on the back. These are a little hard to press because they are kind of stiff, so with that shape flex on there. I usually open up seams with shape flex just because they seem to lay a little bit better. Okay, so I'll just finger press that for now. But there's our little top. Isn't that cute? So now we have a couple of other little sewing things to do before I press this and put it together. So I'll just go ahead and do a couple more of the little sewing duties here. We have little sewing tasks. We do need to hem our envelope back. So I have pre-pressed this under a 1/4 inch and another 1/4 inch on the long side, one of the long sides of each piece of this. And this is also my navy blue, so I'm just going to use my navy blue. Now I'm going to move my needle to the center needle position for this so that it's easier to judge where I'm sewing. And drop my needle, and then I'm just going to run along my little fold here with my navy blue thread. Yeah, my first one I know I did with black and white polka dots, but my kit had this navy blue polka dot, so I kind of like the navy blue actually. So I did both of my new pillows in the navy blue. It's the same polka dot, but just in the navy instead of in the black. And it looks really cool. All right, we'll do this one. So then we'll have our backs ready to put on. Now this one's going to have binding, so I am actually going to, I'll show you the first step of the binding before I get up and iron, before I put the back on, since we can do some of these little things all at the same time here. Okay, so there's my hemmed envelope backs, so that we'll be putting those on in a moment. And then the other thing we'll do before I get up to iron my little top here is to sew the two pieces of binding together. So you need two pieces that are 2 1/4 inches wide by the width of the back quarter, which is about 21 inches. So you're basically going to have one width of, if you had 45-inch fabric, one width to do the little pillow. And I'm going to go ahead and lay these down at a 45-degree angle, and we're going to stitch from corner to corner. The way I usually do this is I wanted to cut off those selvages. So I'm just going to line them up like that with the selvages dripping over the edges. And I'm going to, I've got my needle still in the center, and I'm going to start in the top corner, and I'm aiming for this corner. So I usually do this by eyeball, and I aim for the next corner. Hopefully I'm pretty straight. And then I'm going to cut that off. So then this is one piece. If you had a 45-inch piece, you wouldn't need to do that. So, oops, I think I did them the wrong way. That's a good way to show you to do them backwards, isn't it, guys? Sorry, so we'll just rip. So you know that I goof up things like this all the time. Just do a little rip. I didn't lay my strips right. Okay, well, you know, we'll just try this again. Okay. So I'm going to lay this like this. There we go. Now it'll lay like this, flat, when we get done. It's like, whoops. Oh, well, we'll just try it again. Take two. We'll just keep the camera running here. I make lots of goofs. I goof up so many times. And sometimes you just need to see somebody else goof up when you think you're the only one that does. Sometimes I think I'm the only one that messes up. And I did that time, didn't I? All right, so I'm going to trim these off. So now, whoops, we'll get some of those little threads out of there. I spend a lot of time ripping. In fact, I need to order a new seam ripper. That's one of the things I need to put on my list for tomorrow, is order a new seam ripper, because my seam ripper is getting, so I'm going to cut off those selvages, and then I'm going to trim this about 1/4 inch from the line here. You know how many times I put binding on, and every now and then I'll still do it backwards like that. Okay, so here's our binding strip, and then I can press this while I'm over at the ironing board, because I need to press this open too. And then I need to press my binding wrong sides together like this in half. Okay, so then you have one continuous piece of binding to put around the outside edge of the pillow. So I'm going to stop the video for a minute. I'll just pause it here for a moment, and then I'll come back and we'll be ready to put the back on and do the binding. Okay, so I pressed my little top, and here's my binding all pressed, ready to go here. All in one piece, even with me turning it sideways, so we've managed to get it together correctly. Don't mind me, it's a Sunday afternoon, everybody. Sometimes I have problems, you never know. And the next step is going to be to put the back on. So this one's going to be a little different since it's going to have binding. We're going to put the back on with the wrong sides together. And then we're going to put the binding on to cover the raw edge instead of, you know, right sides together like we often have. So I'm going to put this face down. I'm going to put the top face down on my sewing machine here. And then I'm going to take my envelope back. Now in the picture they show you doing them horizontally like this. I usually do mine vertically, but it doesn't matter. You can do it either way you want. But I'm going to do this so that the wrong sides are together. Okay. And so you want to match up your raw edges here, and that, oops, there goes my scissors again. The raw edges, and then the hem that we made is going to be on the inside. So my hem is over here, and I'm matching up my raw edges here. So we're just going to put some pins around the outside edge here. Ooh, looks like I even measured pretty well. I'm not very good with cutting, so I did pretty well with this one. Okay, so we're going to match these up. Oops, can't get a hold of pins here. Pull the pins over this way. And get these all matched up. So either way is fine. You can do them horizontally. You know, you can put your envelope back horizontal, or you can do it vertical. I always do it vertical, but it doesn't matter. Either way works. As long as you can get the pillow in and out, that's all that's necessary. Okay, and then I'm going to take the other piece that's hemmed, and I'm going to put the hem on the inside and the raw edges on the outside. So again, these are the right sides are out, see? Right side, right side. And then we're going to put binding on this one. So it's a little different than some of them when you put them to right sides together. All right, so I like to know where the overlap is. So see, the overlap is like between here and here. So I like to put the pins in the overlap ends because I'm going to sew over that twice. You don't really have to when you're doing binding. Sometimes I don't with the binding, and I probably won't this time. But I just kind of like to know where the ends are, because with the binding, it really gives it strength there. And when you're not using binding, it often will rip along these little places because there's stress there when you're putting the pillow in and out. So with the binding, that really helps, because then you're also going to be sewing it a couple more times. So we won't need to drive over it a couple times this time. Okay. So then we got that all sewn on there. And now the one thing that I did differently than the instructions said is they said to go around with a 1/4 inch seam. Well, you know, if your 1/4 inch seam's a little bit off, then you're going to see that seam in your binding. So I don't want that. So I'm actually going to use an 1/8 inch seam. So in other words, kind of a top stitch. I've got my needle in the center. And I'm going to run it right along, like on my foot on here, I'm going to run it right along the inside of the little zigzag right here. And that's kind of an 1/8 of an inch. I just need to hold this together because we're going to be sewing the binding on, and that'll be our 1/4 inch seam. So I just need to hold these together to get my binding on. So this is sort of like a placement, or like, you know, just a holding stitch, basting stitch kind of. I'm not using a long stitch. I'm just using a regular stitch, but I just need to have it together so that when I go to put my binding on, I don't have anything scooting on me. Okay, I think I need to back up a stitch. There we go. Go around the corner here. And this is about an 1/8 of an inch. I'm just kind of putting these together so that they'll hold when I'm ready to sew my binding on here. Whoop. One stitch too many. Go back one. There we go. And I've still got that navy blue thread in there. That matches my backing pretty well. Okay. Oops, I think I went one too many. We'll go back one. And I think we got one more turn to go down here. But it's nice to have these all sewn together so that when you're putting your binding on, you don't have to worry about things, missing a side, because I've done that before. I didn't used to do this stitch, and it really helps because then you don't lose your, like if you get one side turned under or something, I'm notorious for doing stuff like that. All right, just about around. But this way we don't have to worry about, having this seam show with the 1/8 inch. Okay, I'm just going to tie that off. And now this is all tied together. All right. So whoops, got a bunch of strings here. We'll get rid of some of those. So there we go. So there's our little pillow top, and it's all tied together. The right sides are on the outside where we want them. Okay. Now we're going to put the binding on. So there's two different ways to do this. I'm going to show you the machine binding. Okay. So I like to put my binding on completely with the machine. So if you want to hand stitch part of it, you're going to put your binding on the front of the pillow and then flip it to the back and hand stitch it to the back of the pillow. Okay. I don't like to hand stitch. So I am going to do the whole thing with the machine. So I'm going to put my binding on the back of the pillow instead. And then we're going to flip it to the front and we're going to machine stitch it down. Okay, so I'm going to start down here at the bottom. I think that's the bottom. Yep. Start down here at the bottom. I'm going to leave a little tail of fabric of our binding, and we're going to do the raw edges are together, and this is the back. So I'm sewing mine on the back because I'm doing the whole thing with the sewing machine. I'm going to go back to my 1/4 inch seam. So I'm back at Q02 on my machine, and I'm going to tie off. Now I've done a bunch of binding videos, so if you need to watch something, this one will be a little sketchier than normal because I've done several binding videos, so everybody should be okay. You've probably seen me do this a few times, but if you need to go back to, I did a real detailed one with the September pillow, with the September bench buddy, so if you need a real detailed binding video. So I stopped a 1/4 inch from the edge. I am going to turn my binding back at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to come straight down on the next side. So if you need a real detailed binding video, go back to the September bench buddy, the rectangle one, the very first one we did, and I did a pretty detailed video with the binding. But I've been doing machine binding videos, quite a few of them, so this one will be just a little bit more, just basically watching me do it. Okay, so I'm going to go up, and I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. And I just kind of eyeball it. I don't measure. You can measure if you want. I've done so much binding that I don't really measure anymore. I just kind of eyeball. Okay, and then I'm going to turn this again. So I see I got a little close on that one, but it's okay. And I'm going to turn it up at a 45-degree angle, and then straight down along the edge. Raw edges together. Okay. And I like to drop my needle and take a stitch and tie off, maybe, if it lets me. Okay, I'm going to line this all up, and then 1/4 inch all the way down to, and we're going to stop a 1/4 inch from the corner. And again, you'll be doing this exact same thing. If you want to hand stitch it down, you'd be doing this on the front. It's the exact same process, but you'd be doing this on the front instead of on the back. I just like to do all my binding with the machine. I don't do all of my binding. I mean, some of my really nice quilts, Judy helps me do some hand stitching. I don't like to hand stitch, so she still helps me with that. But most of my quilts that I'm going to use, stuff that I'm going to wash a lot, that kind of stuff, these little pillows and stuff like that, this is so much faster to do it with the sewing machine. And then I put it on with a zigzag stitch. And you want to use a real matchy thread. So that's why I found this navy blue. I sure wished I would have had a cotton though, but this is polyester, but it matched. So I'm going to try to find some navy blue tomorrow while I'm out. I like cotton thread, and I just don't have, I have a couple of really nice boxes of cotton thread, but one of them is very neutral, like tans and creams and stuff and grays, but then I don't have many colors. So, and the other box I have is like really bright colors, like real bright green and yellow and red and stuff like that. So there's nothing like navy. So I need to go find a few pieces. Okay, so see, I'm getting ready to do the last turn. So here's our little flap that we left at the beginning. I'm going to do our last turn here. It's a little hard to see with the navy, I'm sorry. And then straight down, match my raw edges, and I'm not going to sew in too far on this one because I want a little bit of wiggle room for me to get this flipped on the end and sewed together. All right, so we'll do this one. I'm only going to sew in just a couple of inches probably. Just in past the corner. Yeah, I think I'll just sew into there. Tie it up, cut it off, and now we have to do the little flip. So the little flip is pretty easy. Don't overthink the little flip. I learned this from a little document, and I put this up on the group. It's up on Sew Along with Jan in the Dropbox. So if you go to Sew Along with Jan, the very first post has the Dropbox link, and it's called Bind Aid. And this is how I learned to do binding, and it really is very helpful and had really good pictures. So, okay, so this one here, I'm going to kind of fold down because we're going to cut this one off. And here's the other flap. Now this is 2 1/4 inch binding. So I need to measure with my little ruler out here. I'm going to measure from the end of this piece, that was the piece that we started with, back 2 1/4 inches. So I'm going to do 2 and make sure I get it on the right line here. There we go. 2 1/4 inches. Then I'm going to put a pin in the back piece of the binding at 2 1/4 inches because we want them to overlap 2 1/4. Okay, then I'm going to pull this up. See if I will just remeasure to make sure I got it right. Okay, so they just need to overlap 2 1/4 inches. There's my quarter, here's my half, so here's the quarter. Yep, that looks pretty good. All right, then I'm going to fold this down where the pin is. I'm going to pull the pin out, and I am going to trim this off. So now I have my 2 raw ends, and they overlap 2 1/4 inches. Okay. Now I may need to pull this back a little bit, take a couple stitches out because it's a little short. And that's why I don't like to sew back too much. I think I'll just take my seam ripper and pull a couple stitches out because it's a little tight for me to get it turned. Come on. Doesn't want to go. There we go. Okay. So I got that little piece of binding left over. All right. So the one on the left, we're going to lay down. So here's like the 45-degree angle, you know, that we had, like we were doing on the corners. Okay. Now this one, this piece on the right, I'm going to open this up and lay the wrong side down like that. Then I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to continue in the same direction. So see, I'm going to pick it up and it's going to go this way. It's going to keep going and I'm going to open it up. Okay, so I'm going to open it up, but I'm going to keep going the same direction. So I went this way and I'm going to twist it this way, okay, and open it up. So it's going to look weird because it's going to be twisted. See, this one I need to release a little bit too because I sewed a little bit too far. So I'm just going to, you need to have a little room to turn it because it's a little hard. So there we go. Let's do that. There we go. Then I'm going to open this up, okay, and I'm going to match up my corners. Put some pins in here. But it's going to look weird down here. It's okay that it looks weird. It's going to look twisty, but when it lets go, it's going to be all beautiful and continuous binding. And like I said, if you watch the video of the first little September pillow, the little rectangle one, I really go into detail about the binding. So if you need a little more help with binding. I really like these little pillows bound. They look so cute with the binding on the edge. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my marking pen, and I can never see this corner right here because you know that it's underneath. So I'm going to mark it with my marking pen, and I'm going to go up here and mark this one too, just so I have something to navigate from. And I'm going to put my needle back in the center. Oops. And I'm going to lay this, and the trick is to get this laid nice and flat. And that's why you don't want, you know, you want a little wiggle room with this opening. Don't make it too small because it's hard to get it to lay flat, especially if whatever you're working on is a little on the stiff side like this is. Okay, so I'm going to start with the needle on that mark that I made. I'm going to take a couple stitches in. There we go. And then I'm going to make sure this is laying nice and flat right here. And then I'm going to aim to this other mark right over here. I'm going to do this with my eyeballs. You can draw a line if you want. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to take those pins out. Okay. And then look, it's all in one piece and it lays flat. So I'm going to take this bulk out of here. So we're going to trim that seam off. Oop, but look, see, I got a little flipper do in there, so we're going to have to fix that. Sometimes it's hard with these little small things. I get a little flip in there and then it looks a little puckery, so I'm going to fix that. So I'm going to just release those stitches, and then I'm going to sew from this side so I can see that I've got it flat. We'll just sew the center part again. Every now and then that happens when they're stiff. I have trouble with like bags, when I'm doing like bags and stuff too, because they're stiffer and it's hard. It doesn't lay as flat. Quilts are easier. There. Okay, so tie that off. Should be fine now. You've gotten to watch me do all kinds of boo-boos today. Special day for everybody. And for me, right? All right, so I think that looks better. I think it looks flat now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. But it happens. All right, trim that up to about 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to turn this and then finger press the seam open so it's nice and flat in there. Go. All right, and then I'm going to flip it back. And now we have a nice continuous binding. And I'm just going to lay it against the raw edges of the, pull the pins over here so I don't have to stick my arm in the camera. And I'm just going to pin this. I like to pin this so that it doesn't scooch on me when I'm working on this final little opening. This thread's pretty matchy, so it is easy to, you probably can't see it very well. Okay. All right, so then I'm going to sew from this pin to this pin because that's where my opening is. And I'm going to put this back on Q02 and do my 1/4 inch seam. Put my pins back over here so I can dump the pins in there. All right. Do a tie off. And then we're going to do the 1/4 inch seam down this little opening. And then we'll be ready to put the binding on the front. Looks like I did pretty well with the measurement. It's nice, it's not too, you got to be careful and measure correctly with your overlap, otherwise it won't fit. And I've had that happen too. All right. There's my binding. Binding is on. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the iron, and I am going to press this out very firmly, the binding off the back. So this is the machine binding. So if you're doing the hand binding that you put this on the front, you're not going to press this out. You're just going to turn it over and hand stitch it. So don't press it. But if you're doing the machine binding, you need to press this out and get a firm, nice crease here so that you can get it to line up and have your stitches be on the binding and not on the pillow part. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to my iron, and I'm going to press this out, and then I will be back and show you how to finish it up. Okay, so I pressed this out. I've got this nice and pressed so that it's got a firm crease on the back. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to make those beautiful mitered corners in the corner on the front. So what I do is I take around each corner, like on each side of the corner here, I'm going to take a clover clip, and I'm just going to clip the binding down just to hold it for me. And then I'm going to take a pin. Oops, got two. I'm going to take a pin. Hopefully you can see this. It's a little dark. I apologize. So I'm going to run my thumb up the right-hand side of this and push the corner out. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this down to the, and I'm looking at my stitch line that I stitched it on with to make that beautiful corner, and then I'm going to pin that in place with a pin like that. We'll move on to another corner. I'll do the same thing. Oops, I got a bunch of threads here. See if we can get this kind of... Okay, we're going to pull this down to the seam line. Put a clover clip on each side of the corner. Like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. I think I've got it a little low. Just a second here. Got my clover clip in a little low. I'm going to push this up to the corner, and then I'm going to slide this down and meet up with my stitch line and put a pin in the corner just to hold that corner. And I go a little bit more into detail with this in that September rectangle video for the binding. So, all right, and I'm going to go and do another corner. Let's bring my binding up. Oops, I need my clip here. There we go. Put the clip in like that, and then I'm going to go up and bring it back down on the other side. I've got that nice mitered corner now, and then I'm going to put a pin in to hold it in place. And the last corner, so I use about 8 clips. You know, I use one on each side of the corners just to hold it in place for me while I'm working on the actual corner. Okay, so I'm going to go across. Bring it down. A second here, not quite there. Put it right in the corner. There we go. And then up into the corner. All right, so now we're all ready to do the zigzagging. Now you probably won't be able to see very well. I apologize. It's kind of a dark day today, and this is navy blue, so it's not helping, right? So what I do when I stitch this down then is I use a very narrow zigzag. So I'm just going to pick the regular zigzag on my sewing machine. And I like the zigzag to be 2 millimeters wide and 1.4 millimeters long. So it's not very wide. And what I'm going to be doing then, and the trick with this is to use very matchy thread. If you don't have very matchy thread to your binding, then you need to use monofilament, because monofilament actually works quite well. But this would have been, and I would have used the smoke colored monofilament on this one, but I did happen to find a navy blue thread that matched. Okay, so I'm going to put my glasses on since this is dark. And you want to bring your binding right over to your 1/4 inch stitch line. I'm going to drop my foot down, and I want the right zig over here, and then the left zag. Okay, so the right is going to be on the binding, the left is going to be just off the binding, and it's very narrow. And then I'm going to just zigzag down. The right is on the binding, the left is just off the binding. And that way it will actually land on the binding on the back of the pillow. And just take your time. That little narrow zigzag works quite well on this. And you want your binding to come just out to your stitch line. Okay. Now I do leave the pin in the corner, because if I remove it, my beautiful corner will be gone. I'm going to pull this back just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to zigzag into the corner. Okay. Now I'm going to stop and turn. You also notice that I've got the pivot feature on my machine. See how it dropped the needle? So now I can see that I overshot my corner a little bit because I'm a little bit too far in. So I'm going to raise my needle. I'm going to scoot over and drop my needle back again, because that way I know I'm going to be ready to go down the other side and everything will line up. So the right hand side of the zigzag is on the binding and the left is just off the binding. Okay, it's working your way down. These are easy. These little pillows are easy because they don't have much binding. You know, it's not a very big pillow, so it goes pretty quickly. And if you're having trouble getting it to line up, you know, zigzag real slowly. I've done a lot of these, so I've kind of gotten so I can zigzag a lot faster now. But I do have to wear my glasses when I'm doing this to make sure I'm hitting right where I want. Okay, so I always pull back on this corner a little bit to make sure that the binding lays down where I want it. And I kind of go into the corner kind of slowly, because this is the part that I have the hardest time with. So I just want to slowly go up into the corner. I need to leave my pin in there though, so just be careful. Slowly where that pin is. Okay, so then I'm going to turn the corner and then see how I did. Put my foot down. So see, I'm too far in, so I'm going to raise my needle again. I'm going to scoot this over to the edge of the binding and drop my needle back again because I was a little bit too far in. Sometimes I do really well and I get it right on, but most of the time I'm a little too far in. I take a stitch or so too far in. Okay, let's look at this. Pull this little clip off. Doing the zigzagging. Alright, so the left side is off the binding and the right side is on the binding. And I like the 2 millimeters, seems to work good for me. Some people use a narrower one, but I cannot hit it if I make it any narrower. I've tried. And that's why I use a very matchy thread, because you really can't see it. Like this is so dark and the thread matches pretty well. You can't even see it when you look at it. Okay, so I'm going to pull back on this corner a little bit to make sure it fits where I want it. And then when you get near that pin, just be slow and careful. Okay, I'm going to turn the corner. Looks pretty good. See how I did? Well, I'm a little far in, so we'll lift the needle again. I'm just going to slide out a little bit. Drop my needle back down. All right. All right. Get this lined up with my stitch. There we go. It's going to be so cute. I really like this. This has been a really fun one to do. It does take a little bit because there's a lot of pieces to it. But what a fun project. Okay, I'm not quite lined up here. In a second. Get it lined up. There we go. Okay. And then this is going to be a little hard for me to see too, because it's all navy. This corner was a little hard to see. I remember when I did it earlier. I'm going to pull this back a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to go into the corner, so I'm going to very carefully drive into the corner where that pin is. Just be careful. Okay, and then I'm going to turn the corner. See, I only have to go about halfway on this side, so that's good. Just about done. All right, let's see how I did here. Put my foot down. I think I'm pretty close, but we need to slide out a little bit more. Drop the needle back down. There we go. Okay, and second here, I got a couple little ends that I need to trim off. They're sticking out over here. Okay. And then I'm going to put a pin where I need to end because it matches so well I can hardly see where the end is. So, all right. Okay. Right where that pin is where I want to stop. So I'm just going to stop right there and I'm going to tie off. And we are around the binding. Cut it off. There we go. Got the binding all sewn on. Let's see. I think I've got a couple little ends of threads that I needed to trim. So a couple little threads here. Oops, I keep shaking the camera. Sorry. Then I'm going to take these pins out of the corners. Looks like I got a little thread over here. We'll trim this one off. Maybe, if I can get a hold of it. There we go. Nope, still didn't get it. Well, we'll try it again. There we go. All right, get this one. I got another little end over here. I always have some little tails to trim, it seems like. There we go. All right. So then when you look on the back, I don't know if you can see very well, but you know, the binding, the stitching, I don't know if you can see it very well, but the stitching's right on the edge of the binding back here. And that's why if you press it, you can get right on your binding. That's where I want my stitches to be. Looks like I did pretty well for the most part. And voila, we are done. So I'm going to go ahead, let's get the little, oops, a little string there. There we go. Get my little pillow form. So I made my pillow form. This is, so when I like to make them out of muslin, they hold up a little better. I think that the fabric's a little bit stronger. And I cut these 8.5, this is a square one, so I cut it 8.5 by 8.5. And then I sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around, leave a little opening to stuff it, and then stitch that hand stitch that shut. So I've been doing a lot of little pillow forms. All right, so let's put this in and see what it looks like. Slide it in. These are always so exciting to put them together. And I didn't even run out of bobbin thread. Thought I was going to have to wind another bobbin in the middle of this, but all right. This one's being kind of contrary. Okay, there we go. So I think I got it. All right. Look at there. There is the little pillow. It's all done. And the binding's on. And that is the square January bench buddy. So all done for January, and then be ready for February coming at the end of January. So thanks everybody. If you have any questions, get in touch with me through Messenger on Facebook, through email, call me at the store, and then we'll be ready to work with February's at the end of January. Thanks everybody.